In this project, I want to scrape aljazeera.com. I want to scrape the news published in their homepage so that I can collect the news title and news link. So here is my program. I will explain it later. Let's run the program. So in Mac I have to type Python 3 then demo. If I run this, so I am seeing here retrieved successfully. If you are in Windows, you have to type just Python, skip the 3. And then if I go to the directory, in the project directory, I am seeing that there is 3 files written. So that if I open the aj.html, so this is the raw data that is collected from aljazeera.com by our program. And if we open the simplenews.com, we see that here all the news we collected by our program from aljazeera.com homepage. The web scraping code for aljazeera.com is also available in github.com/mahmudhassan/web scraping, this URL. So if you visit this URL, just go to the Al Jazeera directory and here you can see all the code. Let's set up the code. So currently I am within desktop and demo directory. So I am opening my Visual Studio Code editor. Here I want to create a directory named Al Jazeera, and within Al Jazeera I want to create 2 more directories. So I want to create another directory named HTML, and then I want to create another directory named lib, where I will put all the HTML code. This lib should be in the parent directory, not within the HTML. Okay, so HTML and lib, and within Al Jazeera I want to create a file, the main program, that would be demo.py. Within lib directory I want to create 3 more Python script. So first one would be aljazeera.py. Here I will write all the scraping code within aljazeera.py. Then I want to create another file and it should be helper.py. So some helper function I will put in this file, and finally I want to create another file, that is log.py, so that if we run the script and if any error occurs, that thing we have to report by some function, those will be described in here. So in the log.py we will write 2 functions which will write logs in file. So for that we have to import logging module, and then we have to write 2 functions. One is set custom log info. Here we will provide the file name and we will set the configuration, that is logging.basic_config, and we will provide the file name from here to here, and we will set the label to logging.info. So that means any log or error happen, and we will write in the text file that will be some kind of information, so that later if any error occur we can check that. And there is another function I defined, that is report, and here we will pass any exception by the e parameter, so that if any exception occur, that logging.exception by this object, the logging, this error will be written by the file. In helper.py we will write all the essential function we may need in our program. So first we want to import some modules. So here we are importing import.os, then SSL module, then from datetime I am importing datetime, and from the current directory I am importing log, which I have written in here. Then I want to define a method, that is verify HTTPS issue. So when I write this Python script, I am seeing that when I run this program in my Mac, there are some error occur related to SSL or HTTPS. So for that I found a solution in internet, and here is the URL. So I define that function in here, verify HTTPS issue, and the description of this function is within this URL. Basically it creates Mac related SSL issue. It's this 3 lines of code solve the Mac related code issue. Now I want to write some file handling code. So to write data in a file, I define a method that is write web page as HTML. So here I can provide the file name and data, that is the binary data. Then within the function I open the file name that would be provided externally as a binary mode and write mode. Then the data will be written on that file. If any error occurs, then the log, using the log we can use the report function, and we can report and pass the exception so that the error have to be written in our text file so that we can check later. To read from file, I have defined another function, that is read web page from HTML. Here if I provide the file path or file name, then the data will be read and written from here, and if any error occurs related to data, then the error will be written using the log modules report method. Now I want to write some caching functions. So here the first function is get last scrap time. So that is when we provide the file name, this function first check that whether the file exists or not. If does not exist, it just returns -1, and otherwise it will actually check the modified time of that file, and then it collect the current time and pass to the now variable. Then it checks the difference and then it returns as a minute, so that using this function we can check that when the last scrapping have been done. The last function in this helper module is that check cache function. So here we can provide the file name and cache time. Cache time should be in minutes, so that within the function the scraping time is basically the get last scrap time, calling this function and provide the file name. Then this function basically return when the last time we scrap data from internet and pass the time to the scraping time variable. And within the if condition, we are checking that if scraping time less than 0 means if there is no file previously scrapped, then this function returns -1. So that if -1 thing happen or scraping time is greater than cache time, so that means that if scraping time suppose happened 5 minutes before we last time scrapped, and we assign the caching time should be 3 minutes, then this thing will be true, and this if logic will return true, otherwise this function will return false. So using the check cache function, we can see that whether the last time the file is scrapped from internet, and then whether we need to re-download or not. Now I am going to write aljazeera.com code. So for that, in the first line I am importing url lib.request import url open. So I am importing url open function from this request module. Then I am also importing BeautifulSoup class from BS4 package. So if you did not install BeautifulSoup before, just install it like this. In Mac I have to type pip3 install BS4. In Windows it would be pip install BS4. So I already installed BS4 in my system, so I no need to install it. Here also we importing the helper module from the current directory. So now I will define some constant. So the constants will be as global variable. So here I defined a cache that is 3 minutes, and the URL for this Al Jazeera website is http://www.aljazeera.com, which is assigned in this URL_aj variable. Then for the raw HTML, when we collect data from aljazeera.com, we will save that in a text file, and the file path will be HTML directory, then aj.html. So this file will be saved in here, this HTML directory. And then for the output HTML, so that after we parsing everything and we collect the data and extract the necessary data, we will write those data in the HTML directory simplenews.html. So within HTML directory there will be a simple news.html file where our program will be write those data. Let's write a class. So our class name is Al Jazeera. Here I define 4 private variables. So by convention, underscore means private variable in Python. So the default value I also initialized. URL is empty, data is empty, log is none, and soup is equal to none. Now define a constructor. So here I define a constructor, and this init method I will pass URL and log information. Then this constructor method will assign this URL within this URL underscore URL variable and the log to the underscore log variable. Now let's write the retrieving web page method. So here I am defining the retrieve web page method. This method will retrieve the web page from internet. So within this method I am using a exception handling code, and within the try block I am writing HTML equals URL open. So we are using this URL open function to retrieve the URL. So here I am passing self dot underscore URL, so that URL data the URL data will be retrieved by this function, and if any exception occur then we can see those exception in terminal as well. This exception will be written in a text file by this log function, and this text file will be also within the HTML directory if any error occurs. And if no error occurs, then the data variable here underscore data will be assigned this html.read, so that the data URL open is retrieved will be assigned in HTML, and then we are calling html.read, so retrieve that data and assign to the data variable. And finally I am checking that if len self dot underscore data greater than 0, that means if there is any data, if there is no data, this len function return less than or equal to 0, so that means no data is retrieved. But if greater than 0, that means the data retrieved successfully. Now let's write another method, that is write web page as HTML. So using this method we can pass the file path. So here by default we are assigning a default value, the raw HTML. Here you see the raw HTML, which is aj.html within HTML directory. So if we pass any external file name, that will be assigned here, otherwise the default value raw HTML will be using in this file path, and the data is empty, we can pass the data here. So that here in this method we are writing if data is empty, then data equal to self dot underscore data. So in case there is no data provided, then this data variable will be assigned by this data underscore data, which is populated from this retrieve web page function. And finally helper, using the helper write web page as HTML method, we can write this data to the file path. Now write another function, that is read web page from HTML. So using this function, here also the default value is raw HTML assigned in the file path, and this function actually read using the helper modules read web page from HTML function. The file path data will be read and assigned to this variable. Let's write two more methods. One is change URL. In case we want to change the URL, we can use this method change URL. Also for sometimes we need to check the data and print in terminal, then we can use this function print data, and where the self.data variables data will be printed in terminal. Let's write another method, that is convert data to bs4. So here you see in the soup variable underscore soup, which is defined none by default, and here we are defining self dot underscore soup equal to beautiful soup self dot data. So the self dot underscore data, this data is converted to a beautiful soup object, which is assigned to this self dot underscore soup. And also we have to pass the external parser. So we are using the built-in html.parser, that is in the passing in the second argument. Now I want to write the most important function, that is define parse soup to simple HTML. So after collecting and retrieving the data, we want to extract the exact data we need, that is the title and URL of the news. So before defining this BeautifulSoup to HTML method, let's discuss how we can extract the exact data we may need. So this is the aljazeera.com website you see. So here, for example, here the news is Brazil election, and here is a big title. So if we right click our mouse in Google Chrome web browser, also you can use the same feature in Firefox. So if I right button in my mouse and here I click inspect, you see a bottom window is open where I can see the HTML code. So here you see that this news is within h1 HTML tag. So you see here h1, then some CSS data, and within here, within the h1 tag, there is Brazil election, the title. And the URL for this news is in here, that is that above the h1 tag you see there is a anchor tag, and where the href there is the news link is presented. So I analyze some more news. For example, let's analyze this another news. Come to the bottom, maybe here. Suppose this news, 1000 of Italian. If I right click here, this as well, you see this is showing h2. So the first news was in h1 tag, but this news is in h2 tag. Here also like same, and also the link of this news is above the h2 tag, that is a href. Here you can see the link. So I analyzes this whole page and I found that if we target h1 to h6, we can collect all the news published in the homepage of Al Jazeera. So let's write the code. Here I am writing that within BeautifulSoup to simple HTML news list, I defining a variable news underscore list, and here I am creating self.soup.findAll method. In BeautifulSoup library there is a findAll method where I can pass a list of HTML text. So here I am passing h1, h2, h3. You see all are comma separated string of HTML tag which I pass within the findAll method of BeautifulSoup. Now I am defining a HTML text variable where I am using a docstring formatted string. So here the string format is HTML, then head title would be simple news, and within body there is a curly brace which we will replace later, that is news link. This whole thing will be replaced later by our code. Now I am defining a variable news link where I am passing ordered list HTML tag, and then I am using a for loop, that for tag in news list. So this news list basically is populated from here, that self.soup.findAll method. So we are iterating this whole news list, and each time we are checking that if tag.parent.get href, that means when we this method, basically self.soup method, retrieve all the h1 to h6 link data in this news list and as a list, and then we are accessing each of the item and checking by a if condition, that if tag.parent.get.href, then this thing will happen. So how we can know that? You see that here the news h2 tag or h1 tag, you see that each of this news there is a anchor tag before this heading tag. There is an anchor tag. That's the code we have written here, that if tag.parent, that means this tag parent tag is anchor tag. So this h2 tag's parent tag is anchor tag. Similarly h1 tag's parent tag is also anchor tag. We checked that before. So this code is basically doing that. If tag.parent.get href, that means if h1 to h6 heading tags parent tag get any href attribute. So here you see that anchor tag has a href attribute which is basically the link of the news. So if this condition is true, then we are making a link, that link equals self.url. So that self.url basically this URL, and which basically this URL www.aljazeera.com, and then we are adding, this is a string concatenation, then tag.parent.get href. So you see in this news that this URL is a relative URL. There is no aljazeera.com before this /. So that's why we are making this, that self.url, the original Al Jazeera URL, then we are adding the href URL by string concatenation and make this whole link, and then we are making a title. So title equal to tag.string. You see here that if we type in BeautifulSoup that tag.string, we can get this title that is within the h2 tag or h1 tag. And then finally we are making another string, that news links plus equal. So we are creating an unordered list, that li, then ahref, and here we are passing curly braces, then target blank, and again curly braces, and here we are passing this link and title to make a HTML unordered list of news and links. And finally we are adding the closing ordered list tag in here, and this HTML text which we defined in here, we are replacing this whole news links by the news link we created by this method, HTML text.format news links equal news links. And finally we will write this data, that is self.write web page as HTML using our write web page as HTML method. We are passing this data HTML text, and we are calling the encode to make it a binary data, and this data will be written the output HTML. So here the file path is the output HTML. You see the output HTML is here, that is html/simplenews.html. So this method is finished, and for any kind of debugging we also defined a method, that is print BeautifulSoup, so that if you want to see that how the data HTML data is used in the soup object, then you can use this method print BeautifulSoup and check the data in terminal. So this is the last method in aljazeera.com. To know more about BeautifulSoup library, you can visit krami.com/software/BeautifulSoup/bs4 then doc, or you can just search in Google that BeautifulSoup Python, then you can get this URL link. So here you can see all the details about how BeautifulSoup is used. For example, we use this find all method from BeautifulSoup. Here you see that how find all is used to capture extract HTML data from a HTML file, and there are some other necessary methods in here. So if you need more details about BeautifulSoup library, you can check the documentation from here. Let's write our final program, that is demo.py. So here we are importing from log module from lib directory, which we have written in here. Then Al Jazeera, we are importing Al Jazeera module from lib directory. Also we are importing helper from lib directory. Then we are writing the main module, that if dunder name equal to dunder main. So that means if demo is run is the main entry program in terminal, then this if thing will be run. So here we are using this log.set custom log info. So that means set custom log info. From this we are calling this function from here demo, and we are passing html/error.log. This function basically is defining that if any error occurs anytime in this program, so this function will create a file in the HTML directory, and the file name will be error.log, where we can see that what kind of error is happening. Then we are calling helper.verify HTTPS issue, that defined in here, helper verify HTTPS issue. So basically in my Mac, when I run this scraping program, there are some SSL related error occurs, and to solve this we have to call this method before running the program in Mac. In Windows I do not see any issue, but if you leave this method in Windows as well, there is also no problem. And then we are creating the scraping object. Here you see that Al Jazeera underscore scrap, and from Al Jazeera module Al Jazeera class. So here in the Al Jazeera module, and we define that Al Jazeera class, we are creating the Al Jazeera object in here, and we are passing Al Jazeera.url aj and log. So this log basically comes from here, so that is we importing here, and we are passing that Al Jazeera URL, that is the URL defined in here in this constructor method. And then here we are writing a if condition. So if helper dot check cache, so in the helper module we defined a function check cache, so we are calling here that if check cache Al Jazeera dot raw HTML. So that means if you scrap already and there is already scrapping data and which is happening less than 3 minutes, you see that in Al Jazeera we are defining the cache here 3, so 3 minutes. So here this is checking that if check cache Al Jazeera dot raw HTML, and you see that raw HTML is here aj.html, which I told you that this is the scrapping data from web page. So this function is checking that if less than this programming running within 3 minutes, then this program will not retrieve any data from Al Jazeera. Otherwise this program will connect aljazeera.com and call this retrieve web page method from Al Jazeera scrap object. Here you see that retrieve web page method, here retrieve web page method, and then this object also called write web page as HTML. So after retrieving data, the data will be written as a text file for caching. And finally then we are calling Al Jazeera scrap.read web page from HTML. So if there is any data previously scrapped from aljazeera.com within 3 minutes, so this function method basically retrieve that data and assign that data to the self.data variable within Al Jazeera soup object, and then we are calling convert data to BS4. So using this method we are converting that data to BeautifulSoup object, and then we are finally we are calling parse soup to simple HTML. We are calling the most important function parse soup to simple HTML. So based on the H1 to H6 data we collect the news headline and link, and then within that function we write those news within the within a text file, that is simple news.html. So in case you do not want to write the HTML but you want to see how the data is shown, you can also comment this one and uncomment this file to check that data. So let's run the program. Before running the program, you see that in this HTML directory there is no file. So if I go to my Finder window, and in this HTML directory there is no file. So let's run the program and see what happens. So if I type Python 3 and then our program name is demo. So if you are in Windows you have to just type Python and skip the 3. And if I run this one, you see it is showing retrieve successfully. So if I go to the Visual Studio Code, you see now within the HTML directory I see 3 files, aj.html. So this is the raw data that is collected from aljazeera.com, and then a error.log is created. So I told that our logging function will create a log file if any error occurs, but there is no error happening. So that's why this file is empty. And finally our aljazeera.com Al Jazeera class, there is a the method parse soup to simple HTML where we write the simple HTML data. So that data basically written in this simple HTML dot. So here you see that the HTML data we have written by our program. So let's open the simple news.html in our browser. So here when I open this HTML file in my Google Chrome, you see the first news is Bolsonaro and Haddad go to the second round in presidential election, and you see here the original aljazeera.com. Yes, this is the news, Bolsonaro and Haddad go to the second round of presidential election. So if I click here, you see the original news from here. So that means the link is also working. So I hope this web scraping technique from aljazeera.com newspaper homepage will help you to learn how to scrap any web page, and using this technique you can collect and scrap any web page and extract the necessary data. So if you do not want to type the code, you can just visit this my code base Mahmood Hassan, github.com/mahmoodhassan/web scraping, and currently it is showing private because when I will release this video I will make this public so that you can easily access this one. And here you can see the lib directory where we have written the Al Jazeera code, and you can easily see the code base in here. So thank you for watching.